A single political ad just collapsed $770 billion in trade talks, and the fallout is only beginning.
President Donald Trump says he is terminating trade negotiations with Canada. The move comes after Ontario released new anti-tariff ads. They feature former President Ronald Reagan talking about tariffs in the 1980s. President Trump is accusing Ontario of editing the remarks in a misleading way. The ads show Reagan saying tariffs hurt American workers and consumers, which are real, but at the same time omit his decision to impose taxes on Japanese goods. President Trump claims Canada is trying to influence a Supreme Court case on tariffs.
What started as a flashy political ad has just turned into one of the biggest diplomatic meltdowns in North America's recent history. A single TV spot, yes, one ad, featuring the voice of Ronald Reagan has managed to blow up months of quiet trade negotiations between Ottawa and Washington. And the fallout? Massive. Donald Trump has officially terminated all trade talks with Canada, blasting Ontario's government for what he called foreign interference. And get this, the entire fiasco started with an edited speech from 1987. Doug Ford's team thought they were being clever. They took Reagan's old words, warning against tariffs and protectionism, and turned them into a patriotic montage about free trade. The ad ran during the World Series, targeting Trump's conservative base. But instead of winning hearts, it struck a nerve. A deep one.
Before moving forward, do subscribe for Parliament updates.
To most Americans, Reagan isn't just a former president. He's an icon, a symbol of conservative greatness. And when a foreign government edits his words for political messaging, that's crossing a line Trump was never going to ignore. Within hours, the White House exploded. Trump accused Ontario of deliberately misleading Americans by cutting out the part where Reagan himself used tariffs on Japanese imports. He said the ad was propaganda, and worse, claimed it was an attempt to influence a U.S. Supreme Court case on tariffs. Then came the hammer. No meetings. No trade. No calls. Just a blunt social media post that ended everything. You could almost feel the shockwave ripple through Ottawa. Months of progress on steel, aluminum, and energy deals gone in a tweet. And while the rest of the government scrambled, one man stayed impossibly calm, Prime Minister Mark Carney. He didn't rage. He didn't insult. He didn't even flinch. Standing at the airport, on his way to Asia for an economic summit, Carney said what might be the most Canadian thing ever: we can't control American policy, but we can control how we build our own economy.
For months, we have stressed the importance of distinguishing things we can control and things we can't control. We can't control the trade policy of the United States. We recognize that that policy has fundamentally changed from the policy in the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s. And it's a situation where the United States has tariffs against every one of their trading partners to different degrees.
Translation. Trump can tweet, "We'll build." That calm tone was deliberate. Carney knows Trump's temper. He knows how chaos feeds chaos. And instead of adding fuel, he poured cold water, maple syrup style. Smooth, steady, and slightly sweet. But make no mistake, this is a disaster for Canada. Ford's government just stepped straight into federal territory and blew up a delicate diplomatic dance. Even inside Ottawa, aides are reportedly fuming, calling the ad an avoidable disaster. The timing couldn't be worse. Carney's Asia trip was supposed to showcase Canada's independence, new deals, new partners, less reliance on Washington. Instead, he's walking into that summit with headlines screaming about a trade war. And Ford? He's defending himself like a man who just threw a rock through his own window. "It's one of the best ads I've ever seen," he said proudly, calling it a defense of Ontario jobs. Maybe it was. But to Washington, it looked like meddling. Even the Reagan Foundation stepped in, publicly condemning Ford's government for using Reagan's words without permission. That's when Trump's anger turned nuclear. You could almost see it play out. an edited voice from the past colliding with a president who lives for headlines. Ford thought he was fighting for free trade. Instead, he triggered the end of it. Behind closed doors, officials in Ottawa described the atmosphere as stunned disbelief. One insider said it felt like watching a slow-motion car crash, knowing exactly what's about to happen but unable to stop it. The irony is brutal. Ford tried to help Canada's trade case, to remind Americans that Reagan once championed free markets. But in trying to play U.S. politics, he stepped into something bigger, the myth of Reagan himself. To Trump's America, Reagan isn't open for remixing. And here's the kicker, markets barely reacted. That's right. Investors have grown so numb to Trump's online diplomacy that even a major rupture with Canada didn't shake confidence. It's a sign of how normalized chaos has become. Still, the human impact is real. Steelworkers, auto manufacturers, and energy exporters across Canada now face uncertainty again. One ad and billions of dollars in trade are suddenly in limbo. Carney's message to them was clear: stay calm, stay focused, and keep building.
What we can control, absolutely, is how we build here at home. And that's the focus of Budget 2025, generational investment here in Canada. And what we can also control, or at least heavily influence, is developing new partnerships and opportunities, including with the economic giants of Asia, which is the focus of this.
In a world where politics can shift overnight, Canada's best weapon might just be its patience. But patience has limits. Behind Carney's composed expression is a harsh reality: Ford's provincial stunt has complicated the federal mission. And Trump's anger isn't known for cooling quickly. As one analyst put it, you don't poke the bear when you're sharing the cave. Still, Carney's calm is winning quiet respect. Even some U.S. commentators called his tone statesmanlike. No rage tweets. No public blame games. Just strategic silence and a promise that Canada will be ready when, not if, the U.S. decides to talk again. For now, though, the border's colder than ever. Not physically, but politically. The trust that took years to rebuild has just been blown up over a 60-second ad. And that's the haunting part: in today's world, it doesn't take a scandal, a war, or a financial collapse to shake global diplomacy. Sometimes it just takes an edit button. When the announcement hit Washington, the noise was deafening. News networks looped Trump's post for hours. Trade talks with Canada, terminated. Just one line, written in that familiar caps lock fury that has defined his digital diplomacy. And in Ottawa, silence. The kind that doesn't just fill a room, it presses down on it. Cabinet officials reportedly gathered in the West Block, trying to piece together what had just happened. No one saw it coming, not like this. Months of back-channel negotiations, sector-by-sector progress, gone in seconds. For Carney, the timing couldn't have been worse. His plane to Singapore was already taxiing for takeoff when the alerts started lighting up reporters' phones. By the time he landed in Asia, the story had gone global. Yet when he stepped off that plane, his tone was still calm, unnervingly calm. "We can't control what others do," he said, "but we can control how we prepare for it." Quietly defiant. Meanwhile, Doug Ford was doing media rounds back home, defending the ad that started it all. "It's real," he said proudly. "It came from the best president the United States ever had." He called it effective and patriotic.
I heard that the president heard our ad. I'm sure he wasn't too happy, but it's real because it was coming from the best president the country's ever seen, Ronald Reagan. So it is. It's very effective. It's probably one of the best ads I've ever seen, and it's coming from Ronald Reagan's voice. And it's going to be focused on right across the country, but also in Republican-held areas.
But critics, and even some conservatives, weren't buying it. Opposition leaders accused Ford of overstepping, of using taxpayer money to meddle in federal diplomacy. Why, one MP asked, is Ontario running foreign policy from Queen's Park? It was a fair question. The ad had cost a staggering $75 million, making it one of the most expensive political campaigns ever run by a provincial government. And for what? A diplomatic explosion, a furious U.S. president, and a suspended trade deal. In the U.S., the reaction was equally fierce. The Reagan Foundation condemned the use of Reagan's voice, calling it disrespectful and misleading. Conservative commentators who might have been sympathetic instead rallied behind Trump, saying Canada had crossed a line. What Ford thought was a love letter to Reaganism had been received as a foreign insult. And that's where this story takes a darker turn, because the real damage wasn't just political, it was emotional. The trust between Canada and the U.S., already strained, just took another hit. Diplomats quietly warned that it could take months, maybe years, to rebuild. Not because of trade policy, but because of pride. In politics, humiliation lingers longer than economics. Carney, for his part, refused to engage in a blame game. Reporters tried to bait him, asking if Ford should apologize, or if Ottawa would step in to discipline the province. He sidestepped it all. Canada speaks with one voice in foreign affairs, he said evenly. That line was polite. But everyone knew what it meant: this will not happen again. Behind the scenes, Ottawa began recalibrating. With trade talks frozen, Carney's Asia trip suddenly took on new meaning. He met with Japanese, South Korean, and Singaporean officials, pushing for deeper economic ties in the Indo-Pacific. Deals that had once been quiet side projects were now lifelines. He called it diversification. Critics called it Plan B. But whatever the name, it signaled a turning point. Canada was beginning to accept what few dared say out loud, that the era of guaranteed U.S. partnership might be ending. And that realization hit hard. For over half a century, Canada's prosperity was built on predictable trade with its southern neighbor. Now, unpredictability was the new normal. Trump's pattern was clear: loyalty one week, hostility the next. He had done it with Mexico, with Germany, even with allies like Japan. Canada was just the latest name on the list. But this time, the trigger wasn't a policy dispute or a negotiation gone wrong. It was an ad. A single edited speech. The symbolism was brutal, a reminder that in the age of digital politics, perception can collapse partnerships faster than policy ever could. As the dust settled, markets stayed steady, not because they didn't care, but because chaos had become predictable. Investors shrugged, knowing that trade wars in Trump's world often ended the same way they started, with another post. Still, in the halls of power, the mood remained tense. Business leaders pleaded for calm, warning that instability could cost thousands of jobs in the auto and steel industries. Ontario's manufacturers were already hurting from tariffs, and now even hope for relief was slipping away. Ford's team tried to reframe the narrative. They said the ad was about standing up for Ontario workers, not about meddling in diplomacy. But few were convinced. Even among his allies, there were whispers that he had gone too far, that his attempt to play statesman had turned him into a national liability. The fallout wasn't just economic. It was personal. Carney and Ford, two political heavyweights who had occasionally found common ground, now stood on opposite sides of a crater. One was calming markets in Asia, the other was defending an ad back home. And yet, amid the noise, something remarkable happened: Canada didn't panic. There were no market meltdowns, no currency crashes, no fiery speeches. Just quiet resolve. Because at the heart of this entire episode lies something uniquely Canadian, a kind of political patience that the world underestimates. The ability to absorb chaos without becoming part of it. Carney's calm became the story. While Trump raged and Ford stumbled, the Prime Minister's steady hand started earning international respect. Analysts called it the power of composure. Others simply said he kept his cool when it counted. And maybe that's the real lesson here. In an age where politics runs on outrage, calm leadership is rebellion. Weeks later, as the noise faded and new headlines took over, quiet talks reportedly resumed through back channels. Not official, not public, but real. The door wasn't closed, just locked until tempers cooled. For Ford, the damage was done. His $75 million ad became a case study, in what not to do in diplomacy. For Carney, the crisis became proof of his discipline, a moment where he showed that sometimes, restraint is power. The episode also reshaped Canada's long-term outlook. Economists now talk about economic sovereignty, building domestic capacity, investing in technology, and reducing dependency on any single partner. That's Carney's bigger game. Less reaction, more preparation. A strategy that might not make headlines, but will shape the country's future. As one senior official put it, Carney doesn't want to fight storms, he wants to build ships that can survive them. In the end, this wasn't just a story about trade. It was about control, who really has it, and who just thinks they do. Trump controlled the news cycle. Ford controlled a provincial ad campaign. But Carney? He controlled the tone of a nation. And that's what history will remember. Because while others shouted, Canada stayed steady. While others played politics, it played patience. A $75 million ad, a furious president, and a prime minister who refused to blink, together, they wrote a chapter that'll be studied for years. It showed the world that diplomacy today isn't just fought in negotiation rooms, it's fought in the headlines, on screens, and in the emotions of leaders who can't resist reacting. And in that arena, calm might just be the sharpest weapon of all. So, when the dust finally settles and trade talks quietly resume months from now, because they always do, one truth will remain. A single ad can break a deal. A single tweet can shake an alliance. But calm, steady leadership. That's what rebuilds nations. And maybe that's what makes Canada, even in chaos, the calmest country on earth.
Canada debates.